before you file that 501c3 paperwork, stop and listen to this. Because here are 5 questions we're going to talk about before you even decide to file.
What's going on?
It might save you a lot of time, it might save you a lot of money, it definitely will save you a lot of headache. So let's get into this today. For those that don't know me, my name is Ken McQuiller. This is the Nonprofit Missionary Podcast. I'm the founder of Nonprofit Missionary. We exist to help faith-based nonprofits on their current journey, whether you are just starting out as a 501c3 or if you need that extra boost in funding so that you can focus more on serving and growing the kingdom of God. So this is week 4 of our Mission to Movement series, which is brought to you by the Mission to Movement package here at Nonprofit Missionary. We will help you start going from a mission, a vision that God has provided to you, to all the way to a movement where you have a 501c3 that is fundable quicker so that you can get the funding you need to gain that momentum and to grow your organization. So if you are interested in that, please hit us up at nonprofitmissionary@gmail.com. You can also head our website at missionary.com, or you can check us out on social media at Nonprofit Missionary, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. So let's get into this today, because I feel like the first thing when people are thinking like, I want to start a nonprofit, they immediately go to, okay, so I need to file a 501c3. When in reality, that should be one of your last steps in the early stages of creating your organization. Before you file anything, I think that you need to have clarity on what that is. And I've been talking a lot about having a clear mindset as to what you're doing and who you are serving, because I think it's important. Last week I talked about, or a couple weeks ago, I talked about being clear about really everything when it comes to ministry, being clear about expectations. And I think sometimes the biggest thing that causes disagreements within like church staff isn't necessarily like an actual problem. It's more unclear understanding of people's intentions. And that's not to dismiss people that are toxic. That's not to dismiss people that shouldn't be in ministry, because I do think that there are people that shouldn't be in ministry, just like there are people that are in any position that they shouldn't be in. However, I think what ends up happening is instead of getting clarity, we just end up leaving. And in the nonprofit space, I think if we don't have a clear vision of what we're doing before we even file the 501c3, then what ends up happening is we're searching for funding. We're searching for board members. We're searching for different individuals that we want to come alongside us. And it doesn't happen. Or someone's there for a minute, but then they're not there because they're like, this isn't really what I wanted to do. And when they don't have that clear mentality of what they're looking for, that's when they're like, oh, I'm stepping away. So what we should do first is clarity. So let's look at 5 different questions today that we should ask ourselves before we even file the 501c3. Question number 1, what problem are you actually solving? Because a lot of times when we're trying to start a nonprofit, we have this passion. We have this desire to do something, whatever that might be. Whether that's, say, foster care, whether that's to start an after-school program, whether that's to feed the homeless, whether that's to come alongside people that were addicted to drugs, like whatever it might be, we have this passion for something. But we need to turn that passion into, we're trying to solve a clear problem. Because I feel like, especially in the faith-based world, we're like, man, we just want to save everyone. We want to save all the children, which is great, and it's an awesome intention. But in reality, what does that look like for you in your context? Because let's say your passion is to create an after-school program. Just saying, I want to help kids is not a clear problem that you're solving. Which kids are you focusing on? Where are you focusing it? What exactly is the problem? Is there a need for this? Because even though you might have a passion for it, if there's no need, good luck at getting funding for it. I think, though, if you really do have this passion, there probably is a need. But you have to articulate it. Do some research. If you're passionate about something, get some numbers behind why you do it. Like, let's say you're starting an after-school program. Why after-school program in Cleveland started. And so the focus of our after-school program is those kids that are not just on the cusp, but like on the bottom 10%. Those with academic and behavioral challenges. Because we understand that's our focus. We don't want the superstars that need a little extra boost. We want the kids that are struggling the most. If you can't clearly define the problem, your donors and your foundations won't understand that they are a part of the solution. So we need to make sure that we're asking ourselves, what problem are we actually solving? Make sure that you write it down. Do some research. Hit the Google, hit the AI. Find those resources that can actually help articulate what problem you're trying to solve. Because once we do that, then as we move forward, we become more fundable because you can find donors that care about that easier. You can find foundations that really align with that. Helping kids is such a broad thing, but supporting kids that are academically and behaviorally challenged can help guide people in the right way. Second question, who are you specifically called to serve? Because I'm going to hit you with something that I know will upset people. Not everyone's your audience. I would even argue that churches, even churches, have a particular audience. No church is meant to reach everyone. Because people will always be like, oh yeah, we're so diverse with we're culturally diverse. We're diverse with age and background. Yeah, but you're still restricted to a location. You're not reaching everybody. I would argue that pretty much every church on the face of the planet has a particular type of person that they reach the best. Whether that's, say, single mothers, middle class, lower income people, families, young adults, children. Everyone has their niche. And it's okay to have that. Because I'm not saying, well, only accept people in your church that fit that profile. No, accept everyone. Bring in the people that don't necessarily fit the mold. Because that's one way, number one, that you grow the church. But also, if you have a church full of people that all think, talk, act the same, then there's an issue. Like, you need that sense of diversity. And also, based on your leadership, based on your preaching style, based on everything, there are people that you reach better. And I think as a church, if you don't know who that is, take some time to figure that out. As a nonprofit, though, you need to figure out who you're serving. Because not everyone is your audience. While you may want to reach everyone, it is very challenging to do so. And especially as you're starting out, you need to figure out who is the one person that you're trying to reach. Are you trying to reach single mothers? Are you trying to help people in the reentry program? Are you trying to mentor at-risk youth? Are you trying to support other churches and missionaries? Whatever you might be doing, you have to be specific about who you are called to serve. The more specific your audience, the easier it becomes to build a program that can actually change their lives. If you're too broad in who you're reaching, it's really hard to design a program that will actually reach anybody. Like, let's say if you are trying to serve youth, let's say like our after-school program is kindergarten through 8th. If you're there's such in not only between age, but in ability, in family background, in family makeup. Like, there are so many different things. However, if you're focusing on, like I said before, we're on the bottom 10%, then there's something that we can design our program around that, where we have some more academic aspects of it. We're trying to provide the experiences that they may not necessarily get in school. I think we really need to, before we even file that 501c3, we have to figure out who we're specifically called to serve. And be as specific as possible. Because as you're designing programming, as you are looking for funding, if you're specific and you have that laser focus, I think first of all, your messaging will be easier, but also your grant writing will be easier because you already know who you're reaching out to, and you already understand the need, and you know how you're going to meet that need. So that's the second question. Third question, why does your organization even need to exist? And I think this is sometimes where nonprofits kind of struggle. It's like, why do you need to actually be there? Because let me ask you a few hard questions here. Does someone already do what you're doing? The answer is probably yes, but maybe not in the way that you're doing it. Is there an actual need? Because I think in some instances, starting a nonprofit in this way may not make the most sense. Maybe you have a passion for something, and instead of starting your own thing, God is calling you to join another thing. But if our first step is 501c3, then we're missing out on a potential really good kingdom partnership. But does a church do it? Does a nonprofit already do it? What makes you unique? Because I think when we figure out, okay, this is why we exist, this is why we need to exist, then we can settle the question of whether or not we actually need to have a separate nonprofit. Because I said this a couple weeks ago, I'm changing my perspective on the idea that every single church needs to have a 501c3 attached. I think depending on the context you do. But what if there is a booming 501c3 that's doing exactly what you're doing in your neighborhood? They're faith-based and everything. Maybe you're called to come alongside them, whether it's as a staff member, as a board member. Maybe maybe God's calling your church to host them. Maybe God is calling your church to be a stronger partner and to volunteer. You may not need to go through the process of paperwork and everything like that. And you take that vision and that passion and help another nonprofit thrive. That I think is really cool kingdom work right there. But you have to ask yourself, because if there isn't anyone, then yeah, God's calling you to do it. And even if there are some people, maybe you have a unique approach to it, you have to be able to articulate what that is. Because I think when you do, it becomes critical in making sure that as you do your nonprofit thing, as you continue to grow, that you know this is why we stand out. It's your unique picture of what you do. Like, for example, at Nonprofit Missionary, there's a bunch of nonprofit consultants out there. There's a bunch of grant writers out there. My goal and my passion is to help the faith-based nonprofits with their grant writing. I know that there are other faith-based grant writers out there, but what makes me unique is that I also work within the church context. I've served in a nonprofit, and I've served as a missionary. So I have a lot of different perspectives when it comes to fundraising that I can help faith-based nonprofits or those that are aspiring to have a faith-based nonprofit thrive. So why are you unique? Write down a few different things. If you need help with that, that's why we are doing the Mission to Movement package. That's why we are helping nonprofits start from their mission to create a movement that will exist far beyond them. Question 4, and this is a big one, especially I think from a grant perspective. What does success actually look like? Because I think sometimes, let's say you are wanting to start an after-school program. Like, well, we've mentored kids, but what does that look like? In the end, how is your work going to change their lives? So you can't just say, yeah, we're mentoring them so that they become better. That doesn't really mean much. Are you improving their graduation rate? Are you improving their grades? Are you lowering the crime rate in your area? What is the end game? Because yes, activities are important. Yes, you need to do something in order to actually create change. But funders don't just fund activity, they fund impact. Foundations, their goal is to give money to places that will change the community in some way. So if you're looking for a way to reach people and to transform lives, you have to start with asking yourself the question, what does success look like? How can I, as a nonprofit, create this sense of an outcome? Because also, not just with grants, but when you're talking with individuals, let's say you're talking about it at a church service, yeah, people like to hear that you're actually doing something, but in reality, people care about impact. People care about how someone is going from point A to point B. How, let's say if you're doing a workforce development They came through our program, and not only were they able to learn all of these skills, but now they have a 9-to-5 job that is paying them more than they've ever earned in their life. Like, that's an impact story. And it doesn't always have to be a specific statistic, but sometimes that can help. But you need to be very specific about what the end game is. Because yes, the end game, I know part of the end game, if you're a faith-based nonprofit, is like people giving their lives to Jesus. And I'm not saying don't talk about that, don't brag on that. What I'm also saying is when it comes to funders, when it comes to trying to find those nonprofits or the foundations that will help fund your organization, you need to have an idea of what success looks like and also how you're going to measure it. And when we think about these things before we file the 501c3, then we will already have the systems in place to make sure that we are tracking data. Because like, let's say in your after-school program, you're looking to say, we're helping improve grades for our kids from the start of the school year to the end. And you're going to have report cards and track what those grades started out at and what they end at. Because when you have that, that's a good way to show we have an effective program that can be evaluated in that way. Because if you're too broad with it, I'm not saying that not having statistics is like having stories and kind of telling the general impact is great, but also having that hard data to say, yeah, we surveyed all of our kids at the beginning of the year. We gave them a pre-test and gave them the same test at the end of the year, and this is how they improved. Like, some of those things work. I'll give an example with that. I don't know if you've heard of the program NBA Math Hoops. It's a board game. And as you register, because they're a nonprofit, all of the kids that participate need to take a pre-test. And then at the end of the year, they take a post-test. And they're asking them like math questions, so they test speed, accuracy, things like that. So when they approach funders, say like the NBA or some of the NBA teams, they can be like, look at the impact that this game has had. 25% of kids doubled their speed in computing math facts, like whatever it might be. But you have to have that. And I think it's something that you have to have before. And if you're really confused and you're like, I don't know how to track that type of data, mission to movement package, nonprofitmissionary@gmail.com. Gotcha. Last question I want to talk about today is, why are you the person to lead this? And I'm not talking about ego. I'm not talking about like, well, I just have to say, well, I'm amazing and I have the heart and the passion. Because yes, that's important. I think to have the heart and passion behind it as the founder, as the leader, is so critical in order to get something off the ground and running. But this is more about stewardship. What kind of experience do you have? What has God taught you along the journey? And also you can talk about the burden that doesn't leave your heart regarding it. I think it's so important to being able to explain to funders why it's you and why not someone else. Because I think that really shows the heart and the passion behind it, and also giving a sense of, this is a high quality program because I'm the one leading it. Not to say because I'm amazing and awesome, but because it's important that I am stewarding the resources that God gave me well. So I look at myself here. I lead a nonprofit. It's a workforce development coffee shop. But what I do bring to the table, not only several years of experience working in a nonprofit and kind of helping navigate those spaces, but I also worked in retail spaces for about 11 years. I worked 5 years at a grocery store in the Hamptons, but I worked there for a while. I worked at CVS for a couple years. I worked at Chase Bank for a couple years, and also at a credit union for about a year and a half. It's like I have pretty extensive customer service experience. I've dealt with all type of people from all walks of life, acting crazy. So when I look at like leading the coffee shop space, I have the experience of serving people in that customer service setting. And I can help young people who have never interacted with the public in that type of setting to have a sense of professionalism to have a sense of this is how we talk to them, this is how we conduct ourselves, so that when they leave here and go on to something else, they're going on to something else with skills that they never had before. I also think as starting this nonprofit consultancy, I didn't just start it because I was like, hey, this would be fun. It was a journey that God started 10 years ago when I first came as a missionary. And I'm trying to figure out how to fund myself and also falling in love with my wife and trying to make sure that we have enough money to pay the bills. And so instead of taking the time to be intentional about like building missionary relationships, it's like, I'm a good writer. I've heard of this grant thing, and I think people just don't know about us. So let me start writing grants. And then a year of failure led to me taking a deep dive, going back to school, and learning the nonprofit process and the grant writing process, which then led to me creating Nonprofit Missionary. And learning the system the way that I did helps me to teach others so that as they are going about their journey, they don't have to take a year of struggle. They can find the tools and resources they need to change lives. So, I want to get into Confessions of a Missionary in a second, but if you're struggling to answer these questions, this is why I created the Mission to Movement package. So before you spend money on filing paperwork, let's make sure that you have clarity to build something that lasts. I think that when we look at some of the other things that we've talked about already, how to start one, why you need a container, why you actually need clarity, why grants aren't the first step, and now this, I think that we can really see the importance of taking a second and not just filing for a 501c3. Like, take a second and figure out what you need. So let's get into Confessions of a Missionary here. I've been taking a deeper dive into financial management, as not that we're in like a bad financial space right now. I wanted to learn more about it because like I've kind of learned some stuff with finances, but I wanted to do better. I wanted to steward my resources the best that I could. And something that I've realized is there are so many different ways to handle finances. Like the popular one is Dave Ramsey. And looking at like the Dave Ramsey baby steps and like, okay, I think these work pretty well. And then you stumble upon a video that says, this is why Dave Ramsey's steps don't work. And then you stumble upon a video saying, this is why Dave Ramsey's steps do work. And you just get so overwhelmed with so many different things. And it really got me thinking, so many people have access to an immense amount of information. And I think sometimes it can just be overwhelming. Because even if it's not with finances, it could be with diets. Like, oh, well, the keto diet's the way to go. The carnivore diet's the way to go. Not having any seed oils is the way to go. Not having any sugar. Like, everyone has their own thing. And something that I think I'm realizing more and more is it's not about a particular thing being better. Because I think, like, as consumers of media, we tend to say, okay, so that works, but then someone's saying this works better, but then someone's saying this works better than this. Like, we're always trying to find the right thing and the best thing. But to me, the best thing is the thing that you stick with. Like, for some people, the Dave Ramsey baby steps is the best thing because it's the thing that they're sticking with. For some people, it's instead of doing the debt snowball, you do the debt avalanche. For some people, like, credit cards are never a thing. For some people, they can work credit cards pretty well and can game the system so that they get what they need. I think when we are so fixated on doing a particular thing and saying that this thing has to be the best thing, it only works if you put in the effort. It only works if it's a system that you can follow. So even with here, like I pray that you consider doing the Mission to Movement package. However, if you see something that works better for you, go for it. And I think when we take that perspective where we just want to make sure that we are doing the best and we're disciplined in what we're doing, that's really the thing that can actually make a difference. the bottom line is you're never going to find the perfect thing. It goes with churches too, but that's for another. You're never going to find the perfect funding solution. You're never going to find the perfect diet. You're never going to find the perfect fundraising or the perfect financial perspective. We're all flawed human beings trying to do our best. But I think when we take the time and say, I'm going to follow this method, I'm going to stick with it, that's the one that works the best. It's the sticking with it that matters. It's not necessarily the method, it's how are you doing with it? How are we making sure that we are sticking with what we are saying? So it could be with Bible reading, it could be with really anything that takes that discipline. So, with that said, I hope that you guys subscribe. This is episode 4 of 6. Next week we're going to talk about another topic when it comes to starting your mission to movement journey. But until next time, stay focused, stay funded, and we'll talk to you soon. God bless.